You're traveling through another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and of sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of the imagination. There's a signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the narrow mind.
All right, and we're back. I can't believe it's almost been an entire month. Before I've sat in front of this microphone. I almost forgot how everything works around here. I hope I can remember. Well, I'd like to greet all of our Narrow Mind junkies. We're glad that you've tuned in for another episode of The Narrow Mind. And I've got a lot of things to share with you. Today is Saturday afternoon, the 3rd of February. It's 4 p.m. on the West Coast. I guess it's a little bit after 4 now, about 4 or 5 minutes after the hour. And I want to talk to you today about my trip to Africa. That's why we haven't been broadcasting for the last 3 weeks, because I've been in the motherland. That's right. The land where evolution began, Africa. And I'm almost as dark as Reginald Finley, if you can believe that. No, not really. I did get a sunburn while I was there, and my skin peeled off, and now I'm just white again. So I want to introduce to you a couple of my friends. They actually accompanied me on the first leg of my trip. First of all, I'd like to introduce to you Pastor Kurt Aaron.
Hello.
Pastor.
On.
Are you on?
Yes. Hello.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Do you have your speakers on? I think I can hear something in the background.
How's that?
That's great. All
okay.
right. Pastor Kurt Aaron, pastor of Grace Bible Church in San Diego, California, and welcome to The Narrow Mind.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
I think this is your first time on my program, is it not?
Actually, it is.
Yeah. And let me also introduce to our listening audience, Jeff Kazoulis. Do we have Jeff with us?
Yes, sir. How are you?
All right, Jeff. Jeff actually is a layperson. He's a member of New Life Presbyterian Church of America in La Mesa, California. I'm good friends with his pastor, Brian Tallman. I've had him on the show a couple times. And both of these men accompanied me to Dar es Salaam, where we're building and working on our Goshen Village project. And so I thought it would be good to have them on and just kind of talk about the trip. So let me begin with you guys. Overall, how was your experience in Africa? Don't be shy.
Well, I'll jump in. It was a great experience. It was the first time I'd been to that continent, and it was a wonderful experience to learn of the people and how they live. And I was impacted by their sense, it's a very poor country, of course, and yet they seem to be very content. I rarely heard anybody grumbling, even though they're only making $4 a day and literally working just for their daily bread for that day. There seemed to be a mutual love amongst the people, I think even beyond the Christians, just a mutual love and joy and a contentment and glad to be alive. Seemed to be a pervasive thing that I kept noticing as we went around the city and the country there. Yeah,
that's true. I've noticed that myself. Jeff, what was your first impression of Dar es Salaam?
I'll tell you, I was surprised. I found the same thing, and I found it to be just a wonderful place to be as far as the people goes. The environment and all that is a little bit different. It's quite hot and muggy and all, but overall, I'd say my trip was it was too short. It was. Yeah, I didn't want to come home.
You guys were there, I think, for a total of 6 or 7 days, right?
6 full days.
That's right.
Yeah, and that time goes by pretty quick, actually.
It does.
Especially on your first trip. Now, Jeff, when you say it was hot, why don't you give our listening audience an indication of what you mean by hot?
Well, both you and Kurt stunk. No, it was. It's very, very hot. I mean, you're there. I kind of mentally prepared for it and decided, I'm just going to pretend that I'm going into our hottest summer days, and it's going to be that way every day, and try not to let it bother me. And I mean, everywhere you go, it's just hot and sticky from the very moment you leave. You know, if you're in air conditioning, leave the air conditioning, and bam, it just hits you in the face. There's a smell that you know, you're always living with, and you know, so the environment itself it's kind of rough to exist in.
Yeah, I've made excuse me, I've made several trips there myself in the last 3 years. Actually, this was my 6th trip, and I'll never forget. Every time it happens, including the first time that I arrived there, as soon as you walk off the airplane, the humidity just hits you.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that humidity, and then also usually there's a smell of smoke in the air because most people burn their garbage. So
or rubbish, as they would say.
Rubbish, yeah, that's right, rubbish.
You know, I noticed that the smell tended to get worse as the sun was going down. I don't know if the smoke wasn't going up as high, but it just sort of came down. That's when the people came out at night. People are burning fires and cooking and burning their trash, and maybe it's too hot to burn during the day. And then, of course, the smell of the diesel. And, yeah, it's a very distinct smell, like any third world country, large city, just a pervasive, deep smell that will eventually give you a migraine. And I think we were in 5 different rent-a-cars in the span of 5 or 6 days of ministering, and thankfully the one that we were in the longest had air conditioning and we could roll up the windows, but I really noticed it in those other vehicles when the windows were down sitting in traffic.
Well, the last day that I was there, you guys weren't with me, but Gregory, you know, he was having car problems, and so he was constantly borrowing cars from his friends. And the last day that I was there, he borrowed that. Were you guys in the black Mercedes-Benz?
Yeah, that was the first one, I think.
Okay, was the air conditioning working in that one?
No.
Okay, it's still not working. So when he picked me up in it the last day that I was there, which was last Tuesday, it was unbearable. It was really hot, and I was soaking wet. I mean, from the time that I left the hotel until the time that he took me to the airport, and so I felt like I was already drained, and here I am getting on an airplane to come home at practically midnight at 11:45 p.m. So that's always a lot of fun. Usually when you get on an airplane, especially a long trip like that, you like to be fresh, at least somewhat. But no such luck in this case. Now, one of the things that I brought you brothers over there for, I invited you, is to participate in the Pastors Conference. So when we got to Goshen Village, we hosted a 3-day Pastors Conference, which, by the way, was supposed to start on Thursday, but actually began on Wednesday, even though we didn't get into bed until about 1:30 on Wednesday morning because of the flight, because of getting into the hotel. So there was a little miscommunication on the starting time, but the conference kicked off on Wednesday morning, and each of us spoke. We each gave one session during the day. What was your impression of the pastors that we dealt with? I think the first day and the second day we had 28 men, and then the third day I think I counted 38 men.
That's what I counted as well. I think there was 38. They, there was, I think there was 2 women that were there for the whole, 2 women pastors, but in addition, but they were very hungry. They really wanted to learn. They had their Bibles open as we were taking them to the Scriptures, and would that all of our audiences would be that hungry for the Word? That's one thing that impacted me. Yeah.
Now you taught, Jeff. You taught on the doctrine of the Trinity.
I did.
Did you get any kind of feedback?
I did. First off, when I was teaching the doctrine of the Trinity, I asked who had heard of it. And I'd say about 2/3 of the pastors didn't raise their hand. Only 1/3 of them raised their hand, said that they knew what it was. And it turned out that of the questions in the Trinity during our question and answer time, they were mostly coming from a United Pentecostal Oneness modalist type of background, and so they were just so very happy to have the Scriptures opened up and to see, in my case, the truth of the Trinity. But I'll say for Pastor Kurt, I got to minister with one of the other pastors. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I went to his church and preached on Sunday morning, which was a shock to me. I didn't find out till late Friday night going to bed. But but the pastor on the way to church was telling me just how much he and all the other pastors that he had been talking to really appreciated the pastors' conference. And especially, he said, you know, the one of the biggest things I took from this was what Pastor Kurt was talking about, but how important it is to dig deep into the Word and to preach all the way through a whole book of the Bible so that you hit everything. And, you know, that's one of Pastor Kurt's, you know, what was important to him was to get across the importance of expository preaching instead of just jumping around on whatever fits your fancy. Right. And so, you know, they really did get, or really did appreciate the conference that we put on, and I think they got a lot out of it.
And Kurt, what was the subject that you taught on?
You know, having not been there, I know you've taught there a few times, Pastor Gene, and with these conferences and so forth, but I really wanted to give a basic pastoral theology. Mm-hmm. And I began with the Glorious Church of Christ, and I really went to three primary texts there. And the first was to bring encouragement, because most of these men are not supported. They're in very small churches. They're working very hard, and so the first text was Matthew 16, that Jesus Christ would indeed build his church, and that there would be opposition. We should expect opposition, but to take courage that, you know, the Lord wins in the end of the day. And then Acts 2:42, just a primary basic snapshot of what the local church should be doing, giving importance to the preaching and teaching of the Word of God, practicing the ordinances, prayer, and fellowship. And then the third is that the church was to defend and promote the truth from 1 Timothy. The second, that was a mouthful for 1 hour, but the second day was the sufficiency of the Word of God in all life and ministry, and I really wanted to bring this across because I know that there's a lot of superstition, there's, you know, a lot of mysticism in Africa, and so I just sought to promote that from 2 Timothy 3:16. And I had to scrap what I had planned for the third day, which was introducing the sovereignty of God and suffering, because so many were coming up and saying, now that you've told us, now I want you to show us how to dig deep. And so I just took a basic expository message from 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, mm-hmm. and at the same time showed what the snapshot of a faithful pastor should look like, you know, with his integrity and so forth that we see in the first 6 verses of 2, but just kind of showed how to develop an expository message from 1 Thessalonians.
Right. Now, I taught on the subject of the perseverance of the saints, and I had just come off of 2 live shows that I had done with Dan Corner, where we were talking, actually debating the issue of losing your salvation. And so that was kind of fresh in my mind. I knew that was going to be an appropriate topic. The first day, on Wednesday, before I began, I asked everyone, I said, how many of you think that you can lose your salvation? And if I remember correctly, all but about 3 pastors raised their hand. And then I said, how many of you think that you can't lose your salvation, that your salvation is secure? And about 3 pastors raised their hand saying, I think my salvation is secure. I knew at that point that I had my work cut out for me. And so, and I could tell, we basically what my approach was to do was to hit the main verses in the New Testament that seem to indicate that we cannot lose our salvation, and then address some of the usual verses that are brought up in the face of that. And I even gave them an opportunity to ask questions about particular verses. And I think it was a fruitful time altogether. And now Rob Smith, who's not with us today, he's in Florida, actually is the president and founder of Agathos Foundation, which is a foundation that has been incorporated for the purpose of building orphan villages throughout Africa. He was with us also, and he likes to stir things up a little bit.
To say the least.
Yeah, he starts out by saying, my name is Rob T. Smith, and T stands for trouble. And so one of the ways that he likes to demonstrate that we've added to the gospel is to start talking about controversial issues that are controversial within the church, such as the use of tobacco and alcohol. And then he kind of uses that to demonstrate that we've actually, or I say we, the church in many cases has actually incorporated man-made laws in just the same way that the Pharisees had done in the day that Jesus walked in this earth. And so he kind of hits that. But you can always tell who's paying attention by the questions that they ask, no matter what, if you're teaching on the subject of the Trinity, on the perseverance of the saints, or on the glorious Church of Jesus Christ. You can always tell who's paying attention by the questions that they're asking. And I appreciate the questions. So I also appreciated you brothers joining me, traveling all the way. Now, how long, from the time that you left your house to the time that we arrived at the hotel, because we left on different planes out of San Diego, did you ever add up the hours? How long did it take you to get there?
32 hours.
Jeff had things down to the minute, so I'll defer to him on that.
32 hours.
Yeah, I mean, our plane left with travel.
It left at 8 a.m., right? On Monday morning when we were going there. So I left my house. I got to the airport at 6 a.m. And we touched base in the airport, but I mean we were at the airport for a couple hours before we actually left because of customs and getting a visa and all that. And not to mention the fact that they lost our luggage at Kurt's and mine
in Dar es Salaam. Yeah.
So,
when we got there, you guys, my luggage was there, but both of yours was not.
Right. So it's something like 6 a.m. When that's 31 hours. Basically, from arriving at the San Diego airport to leaving the Dar es Salaam airport to actually drive to the hotel. It was quite a trip. And then on the way back, Kurt and I we went the whole trip there and back, and it was 32 hours, just basically from arriving at the Dar es Salaam airport to touching base in San Diego. Yeah,
it's a long trip, no matter how you look at it. And so I'm hoping that some of our listeners might at some point join us on a short-term mission trip out there. It looks like we might try to put one together for July. But now that you mentioned that your luggage didn't show up, let me just relate a funny story to our listening audience, if I may.
How do you say middleman?
Mpambe.
Mpambe.
Mpambe, that's middleman. Now, one of the things that I found kind of funny is that I had heard Jeff talking about that he was going to take, he had some sleeping pills, some type of sleeping medication that was going to help him sleep. And so I didn't realize that it was a prescription medication, that it was prescribed to him. I didn't know if it was over the counter. So on the way to the hotel, I said, "Hey, Jeff, you know what? I might take one of those pills if you don't mind giving me one." And he goes, "Oh, I can't do that. They're prescription." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know they were prescription." So then we get to the hotel, and then Jeff and Kurt are sitting there on, we're getting some food, and then Jeff says, "Oh, you know what? Our anti-malaria medication is in our luggage." And then so Jeff says to me, "Hey, Gene, you need to share your anti-malaria medication." I said, "I'm sorry, Jeff, it's prescription."
So the good part of that is, I got over the malaria, and even though I was near death, that's just a joke. Actually.
Now, I actually got sick one day. When we left the beach, after I left the beach, I better explain what I'm talking about here. We had gone down on Saturday. That was kind of our first day of rest, and so we decided to drive down to Bagamoyo, which is about 30 kilometers north of Dar es Salaam, maybe even longer, maybe 45. I don't know. It takes about 30 minutes to get there from Goshen Village, and that's the place that was actually a very popular hub for slave trading back in the day. And they've got a slave museum there, and they'll tell you the history. But we actually went to a hotel there, and we had lunch, and a couple of the guys, Kurt and Rob Smith, actually went out on a sailboat there. But we had lunch there, and when I got back to the hotel that night, I didn't have any appetite whatsoever. And by the time I had gone to bed that night, I had the chills, and I was feverish, and my stomach was just kind of had a knot in it. So I didn't tell you guys this, but I actually did not eat anything until Monday night. So you guys left on Sunday evening, right? Did you guys?
We left Monday night.
Monday night. Okay. Oh, okay. I didn't eat anything until Monday night.
So you flew. You actually left before we did because you went down to South Africa.
I had my first meal on the airplane going down to South Africa.
Yeah, you were in bad shape. I was going to say when you said that, you got a sunburn, that you got a little more than that when you were out.
Yeah, but I was okay once I got to South Africa. Now, what did you guys think about the Subway restaurant there?
You take this one, Kurt.
Oh, I think I'll pass. I did. That was the one day, as I made reference earlier, that was the one day that depending on when we finished ministering and where we went to eat, by the time we're driving to the hotel, everything is just so slow. And you're sitting in this, all this pollution, and I had a migraine. I did not feel well that day, and so we stopped at the local Subway. Gene had a big smile, and he goes, "Look, Subway, it's just like America." Well, as soon as you walked in there was just a distinct smell, and you looked at the vegetables, and like almost all of them are empty or some wilted stuff here and there. Now, Rob and Gene just loved what they ordered. I didn't care for what I got.
Yeah, and what did you order?
I took a bite or two and threw it away.
What did you order, Kurt?
I don't remember. I think Gene remembers.
Yeah. So we walked into Subway, and I mean we're all hungry and tired, and it's late and it's hot, and we walk in, and immediately, I mean my nose kind of works pretty well, so I walk in and I'm like, I'm not eating here. As soon as I smelt the place, and Kurt says, well, I think I'll try a BMT.
Well, I said, Gene, sure like America. Oh, yeah.
It ended up being rancid, and turns out I made a very good choice. I just ended up eating at one of the places at the hotel we were at, just ordered some of the food there.
Yeah, you got to be really careful. When you look at... Here's an indication that you might not want to eat the BMT. When you look at the salami, and there's more white spots than there are brown spots.
Yeah.
That's an indication that it's not the same salami that we get back home.
I was a little surprised that Kurt was feeling okay in the next morning.
Yeah.
That was all God's grace.
Now, let's talk about the theological debates that took place in the car.
I won them all. What do you mean?
Yeah. Now, I can only remember two. I know there was more than two. I think
there was two subjects, and we just had like a million talks on them all, right?
Yeah. We definitely debated the subject of paedo-baptism versus believer's baptism.
Right.
And poor Jeff, he was the only paedo-baptist in the car. And so you had myself, you had Kurt, and you had Rob Smith, and even Gregory, who's also a Baptist. Imagine that. All he did was read the Bible.
Yeah, well, he actually started asking some questions that looked like he had already been thinking about, bringing the children into the covenant. So. Yeah,
well, he won't be bringing any children into the covenant on my watch. Let's put it that way. Unless they're confessing
Smith was
Christ.
The most aggressive, and it seems like every minute I turned around, we're talking about something completely unrelated, and it didn't matter what it was. I might say, "Gosh, I'm hot. I want to roll down the window," and he'd say, "See, that's the problem, Jeff. That's why you're a paedo-baptist."
Well, what was funny is that we were in the airport, or we were on our way to the airport to pick up Rob because he got there a day after we did, and we were having this heated debate on infant baptism. And I turned around to both Jeff and Kurt, and I said, "Hey, brothers, we should probably, just stop the debate when Rob gets in the car because we don't want to make him uncomfortable or anything like that." I'd never really spent any extended time with Rob, although I'd met him a couple times, and so I didn't even know what his position was. But for some reason, within 30 minutes, we were back in debate mode, and he was one of the most vigorous debaters in the car.
Yeah, he was. Especially on that drum, he would not stop.
Yeah.
Now, I think it might help the audience that they understood that Jeff was a Credo Baptist at least up until I think the last year, and so he's a recent convert, I guess, or unconvert, or embracer of infant baptism, and so that just added to the debate.
Yeah, I'm a new Presbyterian, and they kept on. Everybody kept on saying, well, it's not that long you've been a paedo-baptist, and yet, I kept trying to point out that I'm just finally became consistent in my theology with the actions of the last 10 years of being, or 12 years of being a father. So.
Yeah, well, there's many roads that lead to Rome. So.
And this is not one of them. However, we had fun. It was a good time. I can't remember, what was the second thing you had on your mind that we were debating?
Gift of tongues. Now, on this particular subject, our friend Rob Smith sided with you.
Yes, he did.
If I remember correctly.
He did. We had, I think on the first day, I didn't know if you were going to go here or not, but a lot of the pastors out there are Pentecostal.
Yes, they are.
And I would call myself a conservative charismatic. I do believe in the gifts of tongues today, as you would see in a charismatic church, but not practice in quite such a blatant way. But they're very charismatic or Pentecostal, and I turned to Pastor Gene and I said, hey, you realize that they're praying in tongues right now, right? And he says, oh, no, that's Swahili.
No, I think it was Swahili.
Well, I think we have some of it on video if you want, but I'm fairly familiar with that, and I knew it was not Swahili.
Well, it was an ongoing joke since I rubbed shoulders with Jeff a lot on this trip that he said, the Lord just really impressed me to do this, and so I said, was it the finger or was it the thumb? And so that was an ongoing thing. But there was one other one, Gina. I think this was before Rob. Oh no, it was with Rob. It was the homeschooler.
Oh, that's right. Is it a sin? Is it a sin to send your children to public school?
Oh no, you're really putting me up against the wall here.
No, I don't want to get into it. I'm just mentioning the topic here. So
yeah,
for the benefit of the listeners, of course. But that would be a good subject for a future program.
I suppose it would be.
Yeah.
One thing I want to mention, I'm looking at the clock here. I know you have a schedule you want to keep, but when you mentioned that you taught on the perseverance of the saints, I think you're shortchanging yourself. I was amazed with how much theology that you were capable of packing into the few short hours that you had with them. I mean, the topic was, can you lose your salvation? But you hit all 5 points of Calvinism and some throughout your whole time of teaching the seminar that you taught. And I just want to, the pastors really enjoyed it, and you could tell that they were thinking it all the way through. They were really appreciative of what you were teaching because they were opening the scriptures, they were asking questions, and I think that the work that we did out there was very worthwhile, and we over 30 pastors, which means 30 congregations with however many dozens of people in each congregation.
Right.
So it was well worth it.
Yeah, I agree, and thank you for the kind assessment there. I almost thought that during the question and answer period, we almost lost control. I thought there was going to be like a mutiny on the Bounty.
Yeah, a couple of those were pretty heated. Well, I just wanted to add also that, particularly on the last day, I think it's amazing. Pastor Gene being a theologian and all of us loving theology and that kind of thing. It's the type of thing where you've got so much to say, but the time goes by so quick, right. and you just wish you had weeks.
Yeah.
And but that last day, Gene was the last one speaking, and I think he went about an hour and 45 minutes, and it was really good because there was a lot. The time goes by so quick, and then Gene started hitting the really hard verses in Hebrews and these types of things and developing those, and so there was a lot of interaction and a lot of people literally standing up. Wait a minute, and and that was a good, profitable interaction. I think that's really healthy for them to really, think through that and to see it in the Word of God. But yeah, some of the Q&A times were good.
Yeah, they were pretty tense. Now, I want to thank both of you brothers for not only going with me, but for taking time out of your Saturday to be with us today, and just kind of give our listening audience a feel for the trip. And like I said, we're probably going to be planning another trip in mid to late July. And so we're going to try to take a team with us so that we can continue to develop Goshen Village. But thanks, brothers, for coming on. And if you want, what I didn't tell either one of you is about the accident that I had in Zambia. So you're going to have to listen. Kurt, I know you're going to have to download the podcast at a later time, but you definitely want to hear this story. All right, so thanks for being with me today, guys.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to introduce to you Pastor Jesse Winkler, who was with me on the second leg of the trip. So the two brothers that we just talked to, they were with me on the first leg of the trip, and then Jesse Winkler, who will be with me in just a moment. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. You're listening to The Narrow Mind.
Sweet.
After taking the last 3 weeks off to go to Africa, I decided to have a special show where I could talk to you about our experiences in Africa. And so the first week I spent in Dar es Salaam, and you just heard from two of the men that I spent that week with, Kurt Aaron and Jeff Kazoulis. And now I'm going to introduce to you one of my newest friends, Pastor Jesse Winkle. Pastor Jesse, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Jesse Winkler.
Winkler. Oh, I'm sorry. I was watching TBN while I was there, and I thought I saw something about Winkle.
Well, you did, actually.
That's an inside joke. There's only one station, only one television station that comes on in Kitwe, and it's TBN, and they were able to run a commercial for the pastors' seminars that we were hosting, and they spelled Jesse Winkler's name, Jesse Winkle. But then again, that's better than not having your name on the sign in front of the church, is it not?
Yeah, it's true. I only made many more for the sign.
Yeah, it had Rob Smith, Mike Gunn, and many more. I don't know how Mike's name ended up on there and yours didn't, but he must have some connections. So now
Jesse Winkle's better than nothing, I guess.
That is, yeah, it is definitely. Now speaking of TBN. As I mentioned, it's the only station that comes on in Kitwe, Zambia, and you and I actually you weren't there. It was Mike Gunn,
Yes.
So you weren't there. But actually, yours truly got to be on TBN. I can now say that I was on TBN in Zambia. So we went down to the studio, and we taped about a 30-minute show where we talked about what we were doing there, what we were doing with Agathos, and so on. But I met Jesse about 8 days into my trip. So what day did you arrive there, Jesse, in Johannesburg?
I believe it was the 17th of January.
Okay, so I got there. I left on the 8th from San Diego. On the 17th of January, we picked you and Pastor Mike Gunn and an elder at the Providence Community Church by the name of James Taylor, or Tyler, actually, isn't it? And
James Martin.
Oh, where did I get Tyler?
I don't know.
Martin. That's right.
James Martin. And then there was Dave Fandy from...
the Fields.
The Fields down there in Carlsbad.
The church without walls that now has walls.
Yeah, exactly.
So we had a good time. So after I left Dar es Salaam, I flew down to Johannesburg, spent one day there in Johannesburg, and then Rob Smith and I picked up these four brothers at the Johannesburg airport. And then from there, we proceeded to drive to, where did we go from there? Did we go back to his brother-in-law's house? Or, I'm sorry, his brother's house?
No, the interesting part is we arrived thinking that we were going to go straight to the coast and spend our overnight at the beach, because I needed to surf at least one time if I was going to be in South Africa, and we thought that was our only opportunity. The only problem is nobody caught the fact that we arrived on Tuesday and not Monday, and the conference started on Wednesday morning.
Because
nobody caught that, and so we were thinking it was Monday, thinking we go down to the coast, stay the night on Tuesday, drive up to the conference for Wednesday morning. Little did we know, we learned when we got to Joburg that you guys had informed us that it was Tuesday, and you, in fact, came to pick us up the day prior and stood there for 3 hours.
Yeah. Now, that's because you lost it. See, in your mind, you're thinking, okay, I'm leaving on Sunday, I'll arrive on Monday.
Right.
But you actually left on Sunday, arrived on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I saw some of your pictures. Did you guys go through London?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
We had an 8-hour layover in London, so it broke up the trip pretty good, because it's a good 9.5, 10 hours to London, and then the same from London to Johannesburg.
Okay, so we picked you guys up at the airport there, Johannesburg. I think we drove down to Warden, a little city called Warden, where we picked up, that was about a 3 or 4 hour trip, wasn't it? Where we picked up two other pastors?
That's right, yeah. And then another 4 hours to Velcom, where we had the conference.
Right, so the Acts 29 Agathos Pastors Conference was held there in Velcom, which, by the way, starts with a W, but it's pronounced with a V. And so we stayed at this this gold mine. It was a gold mine, right?
Yeah, it was an old gold mine complex, and there's a couple missionaries there who are trying to build it up into an orphanage, and there's a local church that meets there as well on Sundays, and so they hosted our conference.
And I think there was about 20 men there.
Yeah.
And now when you guys got there, you were sick and Mike was sick. James was sick.
Well, James was sick. James got sick the day before leaving the States, and so I think he set the train of sickness off there, and I got it. Well, first when we arrived, I'm 6'4", 245 pounds, so God didn't create me to squish into a plane for 20 hours and then 8-hour car ride on top of that. So when we got there, my ankles and my feet were swollen up.
Yeah, I thought you were pregnant, actually.
Yeah, I did too. I did too. I thought it was long-distance sympathy pregnancy because my wife's pregnant.
That's right.
But so once I got the blood moving, woke up the next day sick.
Mm.
Yeah.
And at some point, I gave you some of my wonder drugs.
Yeah, you did. I could use those again right now.
Yeah, you sound like it. So we do the 3-day pastor seminars there in Valcom, and I think we had about 20 pastors, if I'm not mistaken on that.
Yeah.
And then we wrap that up on Friday afternoon, and then we head to St. Michael's, which is down somewhere near Durban, right on the coast, St. Michael's, which is a little beach community. And what time did we arrive there? We arrived there like 11 or so on Friday night.
Yeah, we arrived late. It was another 8-hour car ride. Every time we got into the car, it was 8 hours wherever we were going.
Yeah, and I don't know how much of the first half hour of the program you caught, but we were having theological debates in Dar es Salaam, and the debates that took place with you guys were actually more intense. So the very first, as soon as these brothers got in the car, I'm sitting up in the passenger in the very front seat. So we got these 4 pastors in the back, and they began to have a debate on. The first subject that came up was limited atonement, and that wasn't that big of a deal. There was only one of the 4 that didn't hold to a limited atonement view.
Yeah, but I was playing the devil's advocate, so I was stirring it up a little bit.
Yeah, well, when I turned around and addressed you, I thought that you were the 4-pointer. And so then you finally told me, no, I'm just messing around. But from there, it went to a discussion on Romans chapter 7. Is Romans chapter 7 dealing with Paul before his conversion, before he was born again, or after? And we all ganged up on Dave Fandy. And that was the only time that you guys, from what I understand, that's the only time that Dave Fandy has ever thrown up the white flag and didn't want to discuss it anymore. Mike Gunn said, I've never seen Dave say, I don't want to discuss this anymore. So that was kind of interesting. But I just made a quick list here of the theological debates that we had. And maybe you can think of some that I left off. But we talked about the office of deacons. Believe it or not, folks, one of the pastors said that he wasn't convinced that the office of a deacon is found in Scripture. We had another conversation on does God speak to you? We had another conversation on are there regenerated people walking around who have never heard about Jesus? And then, of course, I have Romans 7 here. Women in ministry. Wearing ties or not wearing ties when you preach, which is more biblical. So we had those are the 5 or 6 or so that I have listed here. Can you think of anything that I might have left out? Did we lose him? You still with me, Jesse? All right. I think we might have lost Jesse, so we're going to give him just a moment to call back. And if you want to call in, actually, we can take some calls also. Our number is 1-800-466-1873. That's toll-free, 800-466-1873. Or you can call us on our local line. We have a new local line phone number, so you might want to write this down. Area code 951-676-0583. We'll be right back, taking your calls live. All right, and welcome back. It looks like we got Jesse back. Jesse, we lost you there momentarily.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but I'm back.
All right. And I was asking a question. I don't know how many of the theological debates that you actually heard me read off, but I was asking if you had, if I left any out, if you could recall any that I left out.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you got it, but one morning we had probably one of our most heated debates, and that was on whether the gospel actually needs to be preached.
Yeah.
For the salvation of, for the conversion of the unsaved.
Right. One of the brothers, we won't say his name, was seeming to advocate that there are men walking around who have been born again that have no idea who Jesus Christ is because they've never heard of him.
Yeah.
Where their faith, what is their faith that overcomes? I'm not sure, but he got a little bit upset when I told him that he was unorthodox, but I think I offended him. But anyways, it was a good time. I mean, we were able to discuss these issues as pastors, and I think that iron sharpens iron. So,
yeah, I believe it did.
Yeah, I think it did. And so we had a good time. So then after we left St. Michael's, we drove back to Johannesburg, which I think was another 8-hour drive, as you mentioned, got in an airplane, and flew to Lusaka, Zambia. And then we got out of the car, but this time we didn't drive 8 hours. How far was it from Lusaka to Kitwe?
It was supposed to be 4 hours, but it took 8 or 9 hours.
Did it really? It seemed like 8 or 9 hours.
It was the most horrible car ride of the trip yet. I almost lost it.
Are you talking about from like mentally lost it, or lost your lunch?
I almost just mentally lost it. I was sitting facing backwards in one of those vans.
A Toyota van.
Yeah, it was a Toyota van facing backwards, and I was sitting right in the middle, squished in the middle of two people, with my legs, squished into the row that I'm facing of guys.
Right. Sitting
half on a crack and half on a seat, and no headrest, no way to rest my head back and sleep. And it was they had one of the biggest torrential downpours that they've had in a long time. There was flash flooding, and it was just utter chaos, and it was dark, and I was mentally prepared for our first 4-hour drive, but it took us a good 8 hours again.
Yeah, and I think we even stopped along the way. We stopped and we visited an orphanage that they're building.
Yeah.
And I think that was in Ndola, or was that I don't know where that was. Somewhere along the way.
It was in between Lusaka and Ndola.
Okay. So, yeah, long ride. So then we get to the hotel, and for some reason, I kept getting like the choicest rooms at the hotel. we got down to St. Michael's, and we walk into this villa, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm really tired. I want to. So I'm walking down the hallway. I'm looking in both rooms. I walk all the way to the end. I get to the very last room. I look in there. It's got a big, nice queen-size bed, and it's just by itself. So I set my luggage down, and I sat down in the chair, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, I've claimed this room. I'm not leaving this room, because as soon as I leave it, somebody else is going to lay stake to it. And so I'm sitting there, and I think you walked in, and you just shook your head like, what is this? Because you had to share a room you had to go to a room that had two singles, right?
Yeah. To be fair, it wasn't just for some reason that you tended to get the good rooms. You were pretty quick on the fly there, and go down and you squatted on the best rooms, and then just sit there and stared at everybody that looked at you kind of sheepishly.
And I don't know how I ended up in the front seat most of the time either.
Yeah.
Rob Smith even commented. He goes, usually it's Mike Gunn that's sitting in the front seat. He goes, you're the first guy that's ever been able to pull rank on Mike Gunn. So I don't know how that worked out. But then we get to the hotel there in Kitwe, and we walk in. It's a Roman Catholic. It's owned by a Roman Catholic. It's called St. Andrew Kim, because the Roman Catholic priest is Korean, or the owner of the hotel is Korean. So we walk in, and I'm like, I'm just going to the first room, guys, So I'm not going to try to get the choicest room. So there's two rooms that actually have modernized showers with one of those big rain type fixtures that feels like you're standing under a rain downpour. And so they have fiberglass showers. The ones in the back, they're like the old school type with the tub and the tile that's falling off the wall. And so Jesse takes one and I take one, And I'm like, I got the best room again. And you're like, no, I don't. Let me tell you something. That room that you were in, I don't know if you knew it or not, but it stunk really bad.
Yeah, I do know. That's because that fancy shower leaked, and there was just a lake of water on my floor the whole time.
But there, for some reason, my bathroom stunk one day.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why.
Well, I had to get you back, and I wasn't going to go sit. I had to go to the bathroom. I wasn't going to go into my stinky bathroom, so I took the opportunity to use yours. Yeah,
so once again, I ended up with the best room, which wasn't too bad. So, we got a caller here. Let's, if you can hang out with me for another 5 or 10 minutes, Jess, we'll go ahead and take a call here and see what our friend Josh from Mississippi has got to say. Josh, welcome to the Narrow Mind.
Hey, thanks. Glad you're back safe and sound. That's good to hear.
Yeah. Did you do okay without your daily fix?
No, not really. I had a couple mental breakdowns here and there, but I'm glad you're back up so I can have my fix every day now.
I appreciate that.
I even tried calling you a couple times while you were gone to leave you some messages, but the phones weren't working, apparently. I don't know.
Well, you know what I did? I actually, the day before I left, I got rid of the Vonage lines, and I actually installed fiber optic lines. And so I was just sick of dealing with Vonage. It's okay, I think, if you have one line in your home, but when you've got 6 lines, it doesn't work well. Plus, it eats a lot of bandwidth. So
I bet that does. And I wanted to also say that it's not fair to pick on the Paedo Baptists when they're by themselves. You need to do it better when there's equal numbers amongst you.
Of course, this is coming from a Paedo Baptist.
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, if you ever come to Africa with us, Josh, we'll try to make sure that we have an equal number of Paedo Baptists. Maybe we'll open up the trip to our Lutheran and our Roman Catholic friends so we can try to balance out the numbers there.
Or Presbyterians, that'd be just fine.
I'm teasing you, man.
I know you are.
Well, it's good to hear your voice. Did you have a question or a comment, or just wanted to say hello?
No, I just wanted to say hello and say welcome back.
All right. Hey, have you heard? I got your clip, and I don't know if I've played it yet. Have you? I've got the clip of you saying that Dan Corner is a nutcase.
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay. So I'll be playing that again in the future. I really like that one, so I appreciate that.
Good. And I also called and left one about nothing better than a hard day at seminary, coming home and listening to the Narrow Mind. Did you get that one?
Yeah, you know what? I do have that one, and I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look for it. The one about having a cold beer?
Yeah, something like that. I don't remember everything I said, but yeah.
Yeah, I've got to hear. I've got several of them that I need to go through and edit, so I'll probably put it to some music, and I appreciate that. Now, let me give out, that reminds me, the new phone number, if you'd like to leave a shout-out or some type of wacky message, like, for example, let me just play one for you, because Jesse has no idea what I'm talking about. This is one of the new ones.
Here's Ralph E. Boy from Climax, North Carolina, and I listen to The Narrow Mind with my red leather Kenny Copeland King James Only Bible with the gilt edges on it.
So that was Ralph E. Boy from Climax, North Carolina. So if you want to call up and let us know what your name is, where you listen from, the new voicemail line is area code 951-676-0501. That's 951-676-0501. Josh, good talking to you. Did we lose Josh? I think we did. Maybe he's gone. Maybe he just decided to say goodbye. All right. Well, we'll be back broadcasting on our normal regular schedule starting on Monday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Now, Jesse, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
I heard that some of those African bathrooms can be very scary. You know anything about that?
Yeah. Sometimes they can be, yeah.
Did you have any scary experiences in the African bathroom?
Not as scary as the experiences I think you had walking down the road in the dark night.
Yeah. Okay. So let me give our listeners the background information. We're walking. There's a restaurant, and it's actually a pretty good restaurant that's very close to the hotel. I'd say it's probably about maybe an eighth of a mile, quarter of a mile at the most. And so we walk down there. We're coming back, and it's dark, and there's no street lights in Zambia. And so I'm walking down, and there's no sidewalks. And so we're walking down a dirt area, and I've got my flip-flops on, which was a big mistake. Walking down a dirt area, and so there's 5 of us, or 6. There's 6 of us walking, and I'm just trying to keep an eye on the ground because the ground is uneven. So all of a sudden, Jesse jumps out from behind the tree and scares the heck out of me. But I will note that not only did I key up to scare my opponent, I also was ready to strike.
Yeah. You. Well, first of all, you kind of moaned. It was kind of a moan, like you were pleading for your life, moan, and you kind of stutter-stepped back a little bit, and you did cock your right arm. I'll give you that. That was good.
Okay, I was ready. I was ready to take somebody's head off. I was ready to throw my my Liddell overhand sock there in the face. But so I decided, okay, you mess with me, and there is this thing called vengeance, and so I can forgive, but I can't forget. And so one night we're at the restaurant, the same restaurant, and I see Jesse get up and go to the bathroom. So I gave him about a 30-second lead. He's walking into one of the stalls. He's kind of looking around like he's not sure what he wants to do. So I peek my head around the corner. As soon as he walks in the stall, I come around the corner and I just grab him on the waist and he jumps about 3 feet. It was the funniest thing. I was laughing so hard.
Cussed.
You cussed.
Almost. You almost made me cuss.
Almost made you cuss. Yeah, so that was pretty funny. Now, you guys left on Friday. So I had an invitation to preach on Sunday morning at Pastor George's church, which I did, which I thoroughly enjoyed. But Saturday night, now Rob, George, Pastor George, and myself, we went to that same restaurant. We're walking back. This time, I decided I wasn't going to walk in the dirt area. I would like to think that I chose not to walk in the dirt area, not because you scared me, but because the ground was uneven. And so I'm walking right next to the road, or right next to the edge of the road. And all of a sudden, I had the strangest sensation. I fell into a hole. And I'm not just talking about, a 6-inch hole. I'm talking about a hole that is a drain, a water drain, that was literally over 3 feet deep. And I fell into this hole. I landed on both of my feet, which I still to this day don't know how that happened. Landed on both of my feet. My big toe, actually, this was a square hole, and I'll put the picture up on the blog so you can see this hole. This was a square hole that had very sharp asphalt edges, and my big toe, the toenail actually scraped all the way down, and so my toenail was lifted like halfway off. And the skin on the end of my toe was just hanging like a big flap. And so all of a sudden, I kind of let out that same moan that you heard, like, like, oh! Is that what it sounded like?
Yeah.
And I'm like, just yelling, hey, like, what's going on here? And Rob and George don't know where I've gone. I've disappeared. They're looking around. They can't see me. All they can do is hear me. They look down. I'm in this hole up to my waist. And none of us can believe it. I'm in a state of shock. So they each grab me by the arm and pull me out. And I totally tweaked my ankle. I thought I broke my ankle at first. It's a miracle. By God's grace, it's a miracle that I didn't break my leg. I mean, I could have had a nasty broken leg. And so they actually picked me up and took me to the clinic. My ankle was swollen. In fact, it was swollen all the way until yesterday. And I'm still kind of limping around a little bit, but it's feeling much better. But they took me down to the clinic. By the way, that's one of the experiences that was interesting, going to a clinic in Africa. It's not the most, it's not like, let's put it this way. It's not like a clinic here in the States. So it's kind of interesting. But the nurse took good care of me. She told me not to cry. She turned around and said, now don't cry. I'm going to dump alcohol over your toe. And so she did that. And then she took out her scissors and cut the skin off. So that was an interesting experience. And then, so the next day, I've got my dress slacks on, right, and my dress shirt, and my flip-flops. So I come walking into George's church, and they're
You
kind
preached in the flip-flops?
Yeah, I preached in my
man.
flip-flops, yeah. Which normally that would be a sin for me, especially because I would be trying to contextualize my message. And that was another debate that we had that I forgot about.
Yeah.
Contextualizing your message. And so I wanted to make sure that I was, culturally acceptable in my presentation, but the flip-flops kind of threw it off. But they explained that the reason why I was wearing the flip-flops is because I had an accident. So overall, it was a great trip. I really enjoyed hanging out with you guys. George couldn't believe that we had just met. He thought that I knew you guys all along.
Yeah, we that was fun. We had a good time right off the bat.
Yeah, we bonded pretty quick there. Yeah. The only element that we were missing is David Fairchild. And so we're going to have to, Rob and I are going to pay a visit to him and try to beat some sense into him and try to get him to come with us next time.
Who's that?
Fairchild.
Oh, yeah, I just spent 2 days with Fairchild in Orlando.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I just got back yesterday.
So did you tell him about any of our experiences?
Yeah, I told him I hung out with you a little bit, and yeah, that was good.
Good.
I actually saw that hole you fell in the daylight.
Oh, did you?
It's a huge water drain. In the dark, though, it's pitch black, and I can't believe you fell in that hole.
Yeah, I'm walking along like, dum-de-dum-dum-dum, and then boom, next thing I know, I'm in this hole. I thought I was going to hell or something. I thought I was in the reverse rapture, I didn't know what had happened. But, it was thoroughly an enjoyable time, and I'm hoping to spend some time with you guys in the future. And hopefully we can coordinate our next trip to Dar es Salaam so that you guys can possibly come through there and participate in our pastors' conference as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to coordinate efforts and just make one big trip out of it.
Yeah. All right, Jesse, we're out of time. In fact, we've gone a few minutes over, so I appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, thank you, Gene.
And have a good time at church tomorrow. Have a good Lord's Day.
I will. You do the same. We'll catch up with you later.
Okay. We'll talk to you, man. Bye. All right, we'll be back on Monday morning, Lord willing, at 9 a.m. for our regular edition of The Narrow Mind. And I haven't put up a schedule yet because I haven't decided what it is we're going to talk about, but most likely we'll be opening up the phones there and talking to all of you. So it is Saturday evening at about 5:07 p.m. We're going to sign off now. And until next time, may the Lord bless the study of His Word, and may He also bless His Lord's Day tomorrow, as hopefully you will find yourself worshiping God in a local church. My name is Gene Cook, and you've been listening to The Narrow Mind.